Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. I'm an analytical hypnotherapist as well as a psychological astrologer. And today I have Normandi Ellis with me to talk about angels. Hello, Normandi.
Hello, how are you?
I am very well, and I'm just so interested in your wonderful book. It's called The Ancient Tradition of Angels, and here it is. So my relationship with angels has been developing very nicely, particularly of late. So it's very timely that we should be having this conversation. You've written this wonderful book. So I think, first of all, how did you get interested in angels?
This one keeps flashing in and out here from my shoulder. I got interested in angels. Well, I always have been. They kind of came with the territory of being interested in Isis and the ancient Egyptian deities. But angels particularly came into my consciousness more prominently once I became a spiritualist minister. And in studying all of the unifying religions around the world, I discovered that almost all of them have angels. They may not agree on anything else, but they do agree on the angels. And so I started to, when I got my dissertation, I decided that I would make the angels the focus of my dissertation. And that's what I did. And I did a lot of research on that. And now we have this book, which I hope doesn't read like a dissertation.
No, it doesn't. I'm very, very involved in it, if I can put it that way, very engaged with it. One of the statements that you make right at the start of your book, which I thought was very interesting, is that you said angels are a state of mind.
Yes.
Tell us about what you mean by that.
Yeah. I think angels are a state of mind. And if I would finish the rest of that sentence, that begins with the mind of God. Okay. And so angels are a state of mind that begins with the mind of God. And we are a state of mind that begins with the mind of God. Angels and humans are not that dissimilar. We are all beings that are made of light. And we come from an infinite intelligence that created the universe. And so I think saying that they're a state of the mind is almost just a tip of the iceberg, you know.
You also refer to them as concentrated life forms. Light form, sorry, concentrated
light forms.
Form.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Okay, as anything in the universe is made of particles that spin around electrical impulses, let's say, that form the shapes of matter. My cat, you know, the big sycamore tree outside, myself, the clouds, the angels, we are all shapes of light. And once we are shapes of light, we are those electrical impulses in the universe that communicate with each other. And so if we consider that we are not so dissimilar from these whirling masses of atoms and electrons that move around inside all spaces of the universe, we become connected. There's this idea in quantum mechanics that whenever two things have ever come together at the same time, if they've ever been in touch with each other, if they've ever had a communication with each other, then they never lose each other, no matter the distance in time or space. And so when the angels and God looked down and said, look, we've made humans, we've made them just like us, then that's the moment when we're all connected. And so, you know, all it takes is a thought for an angel to come into manifestation, no matter where they are or how distant they are in the universe.
tell us more about your own personal experience with angels.
Well, gosh, one of the things that it is important to remember is that because they are a state of consciousness, they take many forms. So some of them are physical forms, like almost humans like us. Some of them are winged, and some of them are geometrical shapes, like the turning wheels that Ezekiel sees, which are the seraphim and with the eyes on them. My experience has been all three of those states of being. But primarily when angels are around me, they appear as humans who were there and then not there, and who knew something that I needed to know right that moment. So like an important message from the divine. Like one of the stories I tell is being lost in Egypt and followed by someone through the alleyways trying to get back, and I was completely lost, didn't know where I was. And I had gone to get a statue of Hathor. And this man comes right out of the mist, the river's mist, and says, "Lady, your hotel's that way." And so I just followed his finger and ran. And when I looked back, he was gone. And he was right. How did he know where the hotel was with all the visitors that are in Egypt? Of all the hotels that were lined up, "Lady, your hotel's that way." I think he was an angel. That is my opinion. Another time, I don't think this is in the book. This happened while I was writing the book. I was in a highway accident, and a big old 18-wheeler came up in the middle of a rainstorm and sideswiped me, broke off the side view mirror and pushed me over into the median. And, it was raining. It was very possible that I could have spun around. I managed to stay on the road until I was safe and could safely land in the median. I don't know how I kept it on the road, but when I got out of the car, this feather drifted down from the sky, and I was like, "Okay, thank you." Yeah.
There's such a lot in what you said, just in the few stories that you shared there. And I have come across many stories of these mysterious strangers who appear and then just disappear after
Right.
they've performed, after they've done something. So it's quite interesting. But of course, the most common view of angels appears to be beings of light or winged beings. How did this idea of angels having wings come about?
I think if we trace back the stories of angels all along, well, the highways and byways between the Eastern traditions and the Western traditions, we find the angels appear with wings. The cat wants to enjoy our conversation. We find that there are stories that have them as winged beings. They become very similar, at least in my mind, to the winged beings in the ancient Egyptian tradition. We see the Isis and Nephthys, the winged creatures on either side of and they're bending over the sarcophagus and they shadow it with their wings. There are numerous shrines in which the angels, I'll call them angels, the goddesses stand around with their arms outstretched all the way around the sarcophagus, and they're winged beings. Now, when we look at the Jewish traditions and we're looking at the Ark of the Covenant, we have these same two winged beings on top of the Ark of the Covenant. They're in exactly the same position. And it's not a far cry to say that they were two religions in the same place at the same time, and not always at odds with each other. And, the Ark contains the secrets of God. And so does the coffin of Osiris contain the secrets of God. That's called the transformation of Osiris into Re, or turning death consciousness into life consciousness. That's what light does.
That's very interesting, because at the very least, what we can say is that we can trace the image of angels as having wings right back to Egyptian tradition. So this is
Yes.
a very ancient perception of angels. You talk about, in your book, you talk about how as a little girl, you had a connection and you thought it was God's wife. As you
Yes.
tell us about that. And I'm very curious about the link that you made with Isis and then with the Virgin Mary.
Oh, yeah. Well, gosh, that's like two different questions, but I'll try to take the first one first. The story of meeting the Ice Queen is that I heard this sound or music outside of our house. And perhaps it was the wind through the eaves, but I don't think so. It's, and I heard this knocking at the door, and I opened the door, and there's this beautiful woman there that I can feel her presence. She's just this glowing being. And she asked to come in. And so, I said, Mom, can I invite the Ice Queen in? This woman in, And my mother says, well, yeah, sure. I said, she wants to talk to us. And she wants a cup of coffee because she's cold. So my mother made coffee and sat down and asked the Ice Queen questions about who she was and what she did and how many children she had. And I told her that the Ice Queen was God's wife. I suppose you could say that it was early clairvoyant abilities. But after that, she came to visit quite often. And as I grew to be an older woman, I learned about Isis, and some of the stories that had been told to me and to my mother sounded a lot like Isis. And I thought, oh, Ice Queen Isis, that's what I heard. So anyway, that was part of how I got interested in Egypt, was because Isis was an angel, and I would say another time they come sometimes just as sounds, they will make their presences known simply as sounds. We hear about the choirs of angels singing and so on. And I think that when my daughter was conceived that night, I heard angels following us down the street, my husband and I. No matter where we went, there was a sound that was following us. We crossed the creek and went to another street and turned a corner, and we just kept traveling around the city, and that entire sound was there. And I said, do you hear that? And he said, yes, I do. Another time I'm sitting with my friend Jessie, and it's the what is it? I'm trying to remember, harmonic convergence. And we climbed up on top of this mountain to watch the sunrise on the day of the harmonic convergence. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, there's this golden city that appears on the horizon. I'm looking out toward Denver. It's pretty flat, and it starts to rise just before the sun rises. And I'm just surprised. And I said, I elbowed Jessie, do you see that? And she goes, uh-huh, uh-huh. So we both saw this city of gold that I thought was a city of angels. And I think it was, because when I started reading recently about some of these sacred cities in the Indian tradition, they are multi-layered and tiered cities of gold. And, the devas have their palaces there. And I thought, wow, that's what I saw. you know, the stories of the Yazdis where they believe the angels stand on the edge of a cliff and they watch, the sun come up. They have to sing to make the sun come up. And I thought, well, that's kind of like what we were doing. Now, what was the second part of that question?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take you back to Isis, because maybe it would be helpful to explain to the audience what Isis signifies. What was she the goddess of in Egyptian mythology?
Oh, yes. Okay. Why is she connected to the Virgin Mary? She is the goddess of motherhood. She is the goddess who is the wife of Osiris, the physical form of a man who becomes deified and goes to live in the underworld with his father. She conceives a child after he has died, and she conceives this child by magical means. She turns herself into a kite, and she sort of dances and moves around over top of his body, fanning his body with her wings, trying to bring breath of life back into him. And that's how she conceives this child. So in many of those things, she's persecuted. She's followed by Set, who tries to kill her and the child, a lot like the story of, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus on the run. But it's also interesting when you go to Egypt and you visit the old Cairo. There are synagogues and mosques and Christian, Orthodox Christian churches all together, and they all have the same stories. There's one church that has images of Mary in it that look very much like Isis around a well. And that was where they drew the water. There are sacred churches that have, I would call, they're sort of like the wheel and the eye, over top of the altar. And that's to represent the angels in their other form. And and this is in ancient Egypt. So, I think, oh, that's interesting. A lot of the old temples were turned into churches. And wherever there was an image of Isis, images of Mary were drawn. So there is a connection.
Yes, yes, undoubtedly there is. So, in a sense, we're talking about continuity of thought translated through time and through different cultures. And we could also say that there's a continuity of story, that
Yes.
there are archetypes that are represented through story, which flow across time and across cultures. And that doesn't take away from their reality. If we put it that, doesn't mean that Mary did not exist, or that there's nothing that is sacred about her. It's quite the opposite. It's that sanctity which is maintained. It's because of the sanctity that this is maintained, because it speaks to us at a very deep level, beyond the subconscious, I think, but to our spiritual experience. So it's interesting too that we're talking now about angels having cross-cultural similarities. So I guess the next question that just begs to be asked is, what are they for? Why are they here?
Angels have three purposes. They are here to sing the praises of God, the holy, holy, holies. They are here to deliver messages from the divine to humans. And they are here to protect God's charges us so that we can manage to figure out how to use our wills appropriately. Those are their three functions. Now, if somebody says, well, I pray to angels all the time and ask them for things, it's like, I don't really think that's what they're for. I mean, you can do that, and it works best if you imagine that they are message carriers back to the source. But if you are asking the angel for something that you think God's not giving you, you're barking up the wrong tree.
It's not like the child who asks mom to do something, mom says no, so they go and ask dad. Not quite like
Right.
that.
No, it's not like that.
Not the way it works. So what can we ask angels for?
Guidance is a good thing. Not the thing itself, but guidance. We can ask them to protect us when we are, let's say, walking through a street that's a little dimly lit, and we're like, uh-oh, and so sometimes, I'll go with, I'll find myself somewhere I shouldn't be. The first thing is make sure you're not doing it on purpose and just testing them. And I'll find myself somewhere I shouldn't be, perhaps, and I'll go to my favorite name, Peniel. And Peniel is the angel that saves us from our own stupidity. That's his purpose. And Peniel is also said to be the angel that Jacob wrestled with on the mountain, and recognizing that it was his own egoic self that he had to conquer, and so Peniel was not going to give an inch until he recognized that. And that's why he changed his name at the end. He changed his name, and he said to him, you have wrestled with an angel, you've wrestled with God, like the angel and God are the same, right? Another thing that fascinates me about Peniel is that he says to Jacob, let me go, because Jacob's like, I'm not going to let you go until you give me my blessing. And he's like, let me go. I have to go and sing to raise the sun up. If I'm not there, the sun's not going to come up. What's interesting about that is that is related to stories of the Yazdis, who see their angels standing on the edge of a cliff and singing the sun up, and so the connections between all of those cultures, the Abrahamic and the Christian and the Islamic, are all kind of connected. The way the angels move around and tell the stories, their names are slightly different, but yeah.
I think it's interesting that you're talking about the angels bringing the sun up, because of course that's yet another link with light, that they're responsible for bringing the light. They're connected with the sun. So that's, but I want to take you back, because you were talking about the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel, and you said something. You said that he had to recognize something within himself, and I'm just trying to remember exactly what that was.
Oh yeah, he had to recognize his own egoic.
That's it.
Yes.
Because it makes me think of something in your book where you're talking about an experience which was not with angels, but it was you experienced it as a demonic experience. And so perhaps you could tell us about that. But what I was interested in is that you specifically said that you realized that this was your own ill will. And so it made me think about that story of Jacob wrestling with the angel and having to understand how his ego was creating an issue. So tell us what you mean. And well, perhaps first of all, tell us about that experience.
Oh, you're talking about the one where things were spinning around in my
Yeah.
apartment? Oh, yeah. Well, I was very young and had this ne'er-do-well boyfriend that I still wanted. And so something happened and I got really angry about it. I was mad. I was mad. I was mad. I was so mad. I started, I don't know how this happened. I started spinning around in circles in the room, like kind of cursing him and screaming at the top of my lungs, you're going to blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden things start flying in the apartment. This picture that I had painted lifted up off the mantle over top of the candles and the statues and fell face down on the floor. And that really scared me. And I stopped, and thought, oh, did I do that? And maybe I did that. Oops, the sad result of that, I don't know that I told this in the story, but maybe I did, is that brought that kind of negative energy of my own will into, I will, by golly, have this, and it brought it into manifestation in the house. And things began to move around in the house afterward. So once it was there, I had difficulty dispelling it, and pretty much I had to move to get away from it because I just thought I can't live in that. And that was a mistake. Now, if I'd known what I was doing, I would have invoked a plethora of archangels and tried to get rid of it. But at the time, I did not know how to do that, and I believe it left a taint on that apartment because a lot of terrible things happened to people who moved in after that.
So do you feel that was your own energy, or that you accidentally drew to you an external energy, which was, shall we say, less than angelic?
Yeah, I think I accidentally drew an external energy in that was less than angelic. But of course, how that works is that our feelings and resonate with them. And that's how they come into us or into a place, is because our feelings resonate with that. Now, if I'm now hopefully a little smarter, doing a full moon service, I will invoke angels all around the chapel and all around the church to protect us as we are praying and talking to God and bringing our petitions through the angels to the heavens. And then when that's done, I don't leave them there. I say thank you and I close the circle out. And so that's a much better way of working with angels than, through your ill will and anger, bringing up some energy that you're not supposed to. Now, there's a story in the book about some students of a Jewish rabbi who decide that they are going to go across town. He was teaching them about angels, and they're going to go across town to a place they shouldn't be, probably go out and have drinks and do some mischief. And Eliezer ben Judah of Worms, that's the rabbi's name, tells them, don't go over there and don't go asking the angels to protect you when you're going someplace you shouldn't be. Well, they go anyway. They meet these robbers. They invoke the angels to protect them from the robbers. And when the angels see the light and the other beings there, they go, whoa, they back off. So the boys go, ha, ha, ha. They come back to town and they tell Eliezer ben Judah of Worms what they did. And he goes, no, that's not how you use angels. That's not how angels are meant to save you or protect you. He said, if you don't believe me, you go back over there yourself without the angels and see what happens. So they didn't. And the robbers got him and killed him. So that's kind of a hard lesson, and we think, oh, that's so terrible. And it is kind of terrible, but on the other hand, we live forever. So they'll come back and they'll figure it out. Won't do that again, you know. But still, I think that's rather an interesting lesson that the rabbi gives them.
So essentially what we're saying is we need to be respectful.
Yes, very
Yes.
much so.
Which
Yeah.
I think would be obvious to most people that we should always be respectful of, well, it comes back to being respectful of everything, because we need to be respectful of our own lives, of our own selves, of everything that lives here and everything that is beyond. And but funnily enough, it's also made me think about that old commandment about taking the Lord's name in vain. And
Ah,
knowing that in ancient cultures, words were deemed to have a power and an energy, and you're not meant to be using a God's name without due respect because of the energy that you're invoking and connected with it. So this is an old thing, and you went, aha, so you've got a view on this too.
I do. I do. I believe that is exactly right. Um, I believe that words are just as much an electrical power and energy and light as the human body that I described before, or as a lightning bolt. You know, God appears as a lightning bolt for a reason. You know, and the words, the language in the beginning was the word. That is how we create things. Um, Words are extensions then of our consciousness. Okay, so as you just said, don't say it if you don't mean it. You know, but to be very careful about how we invoke the words. Now, the Kabbalists got into it so much that they would look at the language itself and say, oh, I don't like the way that word's constructed. It doesn't add up numerologically to a good outcome. And so they would change the word. And so they would make these, you know, it's what we call spells, you know. And I don't mean that in a negative word. We have spelling bees, you know, so that you say something in the right way, you spell it in the right way. And that's kind of a mundane version of what a spell is supposed to do. It's to, the ancient Egyptians had a wonderful, again, I always go back to them, wonderful way of describing the power of magic or the power of language. They called it Heka, you know, like it could be a hex or it could be a haiku. It was, you know, it was the same language. It's how you use it. And they said that Heka was the proper speech, the proper sound, invocation, and the proper intention. And when all three of those were moving together, then you could create and manifest something.
It makes sense also from the point of view that we open our mouths and we're making sounds, and we know that sound itself is an energy. And we
Yes.
know that in the evolution of our language, at the heart of it was the understanding that certain sounds were sacred sounds because of the energy that was carried within them. So it's yet another level of understanding why words matter, and why names matter, because when we are naming something, that sound carries an energy. So this is a very important thing, and it's what came to mind when we were talking about how there is a proper way of connecting with angels, that it must be done with respect and
Right.
with goodwill.
and with goodwill. Absolutely. Now, the whole idea of angelology, which was something that Eliezer ben Judah Worms came up with, he came up with this whole thing of what's it called? Gematria, which is the power of language and the power of angels' names, and that all of their names are an evocation of the power of God. In the same way that the Islamic tradition says there are 99 names of God, and they are like the names of angels. The one who's the opener of the way, the one who closes things down, who ends things. Well, Raphael is an opener of the way. Gabriel closes things down. I mean, they're the same. They're the same energies. Maybe not the same beings, but close.
Well, what a fascinating study and journey you have been on. And I thank you for joining us and sharing some of that with us. And I remind everyone that the book that we've been discussing, which will tell you so much more, is called The Ancient Tradition of Angels. And I'll be putting a link to it in the description box. And if people wanted to find out more about you and your work, how do they do that? Is there a website?
Yes, pretty easy to find. It's the www.normandyellis.com. It's Normandy with an I. They can also go to, I have a website, twoladies.travelco.com. So I have a travel company in which we go to Egypt and do trips through Egypt. And I'm hoping to add some trips elsewhere. So it's more angel oriented, but right now it's mostly Egyptian oriented.
Well,
if you want to go see angels, let's call me.
That's fabulous. That's an invitation that's very hard to resist. Thank you very much, Normandi.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching. Now, next time we stay with the topic of angels, we are going to be looking at archangel alchemy healing. Until then, goodbye.